they have so many people at that club who have been allowed to learn on the job over the past decade, whether it's Woodward moving into the football side of things despite having no experience of it, whether it's Matt Judge becoming the negotiator despite not having previous football negotiating experience, whether it's Kieran McKenna, who was a youth coach and then all of a sudden he was Manchester United's first team coach, whether it's Michael Carrick moving in to become a coach as well. These are all people that were learning on the job at the most demanding environment in the world, or at least it should be. And now, Richard Arnold's about to have certainly more say, it appears, over the football side of the club. And we know that he's not got very much experience in terms of dealing with agents or making decisions over managers. And that is the story of Manchester United over the past decade. At so many parts of the club, you're asking, have they got the best fit and the most qualified person for that job? And the answer is almost invariably no.
I think they generally tend to make sure that the people they have in the commercial department are experienced and are good at their job. And I don't think they stand for sort of sustained underperformance in the commercial department. But commercial department ends up reflecting what you do on the pitch, not the other way around. And they have ended up flatlining as a commercial force because they've not ended up getting huge amounts of money from sponsorship deals which were linked to success, and the brand hasn't really grown because the football club has stagnated, I'd say, for several years.
Do you think Ole's problem now, Laurie, is that this is his team and his players, and the players that have come in are his players? You would have to believe that. And therefore, there have to be greater questions around him, because you would say, well, hang on a minute, you just picked the same starting 11 that made a right mess of it at home to Atalanta in the first 45 minutes on Wednesday for this Liverpool game. And you've got players on the bench that apparently you spent 2 years chasing, trying to sign, and they're not even in the team. The questions now, quite rightly, can be on Solskjaer's tactics and transfers.
Yeah, absolutely. Before now, you could always, you look back to that team in 2019, 2020, when you got Andreas Pereira as the starting number 10, and you're thinking, okay, that's obviously going to hamper a Manchester United manager. The options on the bench just weren't there. The amount of times they went behind in games and just drifted to 1-0 defeats, it was embarrassing for a club of United stature. And so therefore you had this idea that, okay, with Solskjaer, he could identify the broader issues at the club and could improve that situation. Now, he has got a large amount of players that are his picks in the team, in the squad. You could probably argue over a couple. Donny van de Beek, we'll go back to as perhaps one of the players that was available at the time, and did he absolutely want? But that's perhaps a moot point, because as you say, ultimately Jadon Sancho is in the squad now. Cristiano Ronaldo, Rafael Varane. I know obviously he's been injured for the last couple of games, and I suppose maybe that exposes the job that he was doing if United have fragmented so quickly in his absence. But I think this is why people are now justifiably scrutinising Solskjaer's position, because it's 3 years in. So not only is the kind of idea of your team supposed to be instilled properly, but also the players that you've got are your players, and you're able to kind of instruct them to the fullest degree, without perhaps getting back chat, or without players being there that you don't want there. That he's obviously mentioned when he first took over certain players that weren't up to standards in that regard, and it seems to be getting worse. The way that defence is all over the place against Leicester, obviously at Atalanta, but yesterday at the back four. That back four is the back four that was starting last season, and actually doing quite well. So what's happened for them to kind of lose all cohesion?
Laurie, it's not just the back four; it's actually the back 10. That was his team for most of last season. Greenwood, Fernandes, Rashford, McTominay, Fred, De Gea, was a bit more in and out. These are the players that he trusts. These are the ones that are meant to have his back. The ones on the bench are the ones that he maybe has doubts about, whether that's Van der Beek or Lingard or Sancho or whatever. This was his fallback. Where do you go from here? Because McTominay and Fred, I actually didn't think they were the real problem yesterday. I think the whole setup was the problem. But when the ones that you trust aren't doing it for you, then you've got a massive problem. And there's all such weird decisions that they make. Why did they give Eric Bailly a new contract? Right, they gave him a new contract earlier this year. Harry Maguire clearly, wasn't fit, didn't look fully fit for that game at Leicester last week. But the possibility of playing playing Bailly was so terrifying for Solskjaer that he was prepared to play a half-fit Maguire. Meanwhile, you've got Bailly on a contract for a few more years. I'm getting worked up, but it's absolutely
but that also and listen, you're quite often in a whole variety of sports. You're a better player when you're not in the team. If a team is struggling, but if you are Bailly, Dalot, Van der Beek, Lingard, just to think of four, then you go, well, hang on, how on earth are we not even being given an opportunity? And Lingard probably said something along those lines to a fan yesterday. It seems that by having Solskjaer's trust, you become in some ways almost untouchable. That for this massive squad, to all intents and purposes, there isn't really massive competition for places because half of them don't appear to be trusted, Laurie.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I mean, the Lingard thing is one that has baffled me this season. The fact that he's produced every time he's played pretty much when he's come off the bench and to not get a chance. I think it perhaps stems back to the fact that Cristiano Ronaldo, he tried to rotate him out of the team against Everton and got pulled up by Fergie straight away, which is, I suppose, unfortunate. But equally, it seems that Ronaldo is, undroppable, even coming off in a game. He came off against Young Boys when they were down to 10 men, and that was scrutinised. So all these, and you think perhaps a manager who has established pedigree, who's won things in the past, wouldn't have any qualms with that, would embrace, whatever scrutiny came his way. Whereas with Solskjaer, it's understandable if he feels perhaps a little bit less secure in that kind of dynamic, and the players therefore will also be slightly questioning that dynamic. But I think the Ronaldo thing is an interesting thing.
Can't have anybody that's untouchable, can you, Ollie? I mean, Mane was left out yesterday. Matip was, who's you could argue has been Liverpool's best centre half this season. Actually, he was left out yesterday. There's nobody really that's untouchable within that Liverpool side. I mean, there are plenty of other positive comparisons for Liverpool compared to Manchester United, but that's a big one.
Well, I mean, I would say, Klopp generally hasn't been a massive rotator of his squad over the time he's been at Liverpool. He's not to this way that Guardiola has at Manchester City. But I would say that the difference at Liverpool at the moment, and it wasn't the case midway through last season, is they've got sort of 17, 18, 19 players playing really well. So it doesn't really matter who you play. Whereas Manchester United have got, I was going to say 5 or 6 playing well, but they haven't got 5 or 6 playing well. They started the season with maybe 5 or 6 playing well. They've probably got nobody playing well now, and it doesn't matter who you play. And it's so to have, I mean, for Harry Maguire to have come in as what was it, £80 million and made captain very quickly, you would have imagined that would have taken a really, really high impact, Van Dijk type impact, really high performance level, and it hasn't. It's almost by default. He's become the sort of rock-like figure around which they build their defence, and he's not a rock. He's a good defender. I think he was excellent for England in the Euros. I think to be honest, I think the times I've been most impressed with him have been playing for England, and I don't know what that says about the coaching setup or the personnel at Manchester United. But all these players, like Fred becoming the sort of go-to man, despite never really, really doing it for Manchester United. McTominay being a go-to man and a sort of untouchable, despite being a sort of willing and reasonably talented, but not elite level player. And the team is full of this. And this is why when people say, oh, well, he's restored the culture, he's restored this, he's restored a sort of sense of, Man United values. I don't think he has at all, Solskjaer. I think he's done certain things. He's made it, he's stabilized the club. He's made it, he's brought some kind of coherence in terms of the transfer strategy. But I don't know how anybody who really sort of understands the Manchester United heritage and ethos and tradition and values would look at that team, and not just yesterday, but even over the last, the last two years really, and say, look, that is a Manchester United team. Everybody's fighting for everything. You've got players there, Pogba, who has strolled for 5.5 years. How can you say that this Manchester United team embodies Ferguson values, Busby values? If you've got a player who just strolls and kind of checks in and out of the team, and he's not the only one. Martial, Lingard's had spells of terrible form. Rashford's had terrible spells of form. Maguire currently, it doesn't look like a setup which has any sense of real intensity, sort of self-governance,
lack of ruthlessness,
leadership. That is what comes across. And I think if you put Manchester United's players in, under a different manager and put Solskjaer in charge of, say, Liverpool's squad or Manchester City's squad, United have good players. Not absolutely everywhere, but they have good players. And I just think the idea that Solskjaer has restored that attitude is a myth, really. I think he's restored harmony. He's made it a sort of more tranquil, stable club, but it just looks all a bit too comfortable to me.
I think you're definitely right about the ruthlessness. He was ruthless when in that first summer, in terms of looking at the decision to get rid of Romelu Lukaku, which I don't really know how that's aged, really, given what he's done since. But I think most people who were watching him in his final season felt it was the right thing to do at the time, as well. But the patience he's shown with players, particularly like Martial, Pogba, Maguire at times, De Gea, he's had a good start to this season, but how many mistakes did he have to make before he was dropped? And Dean Henderson was given a run last season. And you can say with sort of players like De Gea and Maguire and Shaw that they've got better at times under Solskjaer, and they've recovered from bad runs of form, but he never really looked likely to drop them at the moments where he needed to probably make that point. And, I think the Pogba situation just kind of encapsulates all of it. You've got this player who they're offering to make, probably behind Ronaldo, as higher paid player at the club. And on what evidence? On what evidence over the past 5.5 years? Could you sit down and say, here's all the things that he's passed in terms of key performance indicators to justify that status? And then if they do that, they'll go round another cycle where Bruno Fernandes expects that and Marcus Rashford expects that. And you just go round and round and round and round and round. And, there were fans clapping Pogba off yesterday after he came on for 15 minutes and got himself sent off. It's like, I'm honestly just like at a complete loss. And it is that lack of ruthlessness that Pogba, they had a decision to make. It could have been last summer. It could have been this summer. I think the fact they bought Donny van der Beek suggests that they maybe thought a decision was coming on Paul Pogba, but instead they've just let it play out because they get once every 6 weeks or so, they get this fantastic performance, and it kind of deludes them into thinking, oh, we could get that every week still. There's still that player we can unlock in there, whether we get that extra signing here or we move that player there. And then it doesn't happen. And now they're in a situation where they've got an asset who, whatever United fans might think of him, is considered one of the best players in Europe by a lot of different clubs, that they're probably going to lose for nothing. Because why on earth would he sign a contract at the moment to stay at United? And it's just another encapsulation of really poor decision making across all levels of the club there.